कहने को जश्न बहारा है।
Although the jinn are said to be made from smokeless fire, another jinn-like Arabic creature called gawas are as far removed from the fire as possible, because they inhabit the waters and not just any waters. They don't dwell in shallow ponds and rivers, like you might expect from a local water spirit. They inhabit the deepest, darkest and foulest depths of oceans, and their temperament is just as foul. Their malevolent actions include causing droughts, most likely by preventing the rain clouds to form properly, tormenting people in their waking life as well as in their sleep, and poisoning any water supply they come across. They not only represent the dangers of the ocean waves in a deserted lands. They represent its corruption in the dry lands where water can be scarce. Having these malevolent entities poison the only food supply, or steal the water from the skies can be a difference between life and death. The gawas represent the corruption of the most sacred and life-giving element that everyday people depend upon every hour, the water.
In Islamic tradition of Arabic countries, the name Marid literally translates into the rebellious and describes a vast variety of Arabic demons that were turned into concept of jinn after Islamization. Compared to the ifrits, but different from the shaitans, they are a class of evil spirits on their own, sometimes equated to the Persian concept of the devin. They are supernatural beings that want to predict the future, and to do so, ascend towards the heaven. There, they attempt to spy on angels to see what they plan for the humans, to refer it to the humans who employ them, or just use it against the angels, but often end up kicked out from the heaven, as the angelic guards send the stars themselves to banish them. They are often called or compared to rebellious giants. They are said to inhabit the netherworld, unlike the ifrits who inhabit hell, but are just as rebellious and malevolent. It is said that if they were not restricted by angels, their schemes would abolish humanity already. Alternatively, it is said that cunning humans can outsmart and defeat the Marid.
As a country bordering the Europe, Cyprus shares many legends with the European neighbors, one of them being the Naiads. Much better known from Greek mythology, they are the most associated with. Like in the Greek part, the Cyprian Naiads are a type of nymphs associated with sources of water like rivers and lakes. And like in the Greek mythos, they are both benevolent and a dangerous threat, depending on who tells the tale. From one hand, in normally arid climate of Cyprus, these beings were almost revered for their water affinity, believed to always bring plenty of water in the neighboring rivers and ponds, despite the harsh conditions. For these reasons, the water bodies were held sacred, and offerings have been made to honor the waters and the powerful spirits residing in them. The Naiads themselves also were powerful mythological heroes, being credited with nursing infant Adonis with the life-giving juices of the myrrh tree, raising him to become the hero that he knows as today. From the other hand, they could be possessive and violent. It approached wrong way of if their advances were rejected by the men.
The Nereides, or Nereids, are the Naiads' Goth cousins. Beautiful and alluring, as tempting and as deadly as the raging rivers and seas they reside in. As I like to do in this series, yes, I will once more compare them to Polish rusalkas, 'cause, why not? Just like them, they can be associated with all types of natural environments, be it forested, meadowy, mountainous, or aquatic. They dance at night under the light of the moon. At the middays they search for unwary travelers, who dared to venture too far into the untamed wilderness. And then, they promise a help. Help that is never given, and the unfortunate humans become their lovers, slaves, or even, dinner. Springs, rivers, even old trees were believed to be their resting places during the daytime, and the locals paid special respect and caution to these places, giving offerings to these beautiful but deedly nymphs, to be protected under their domain and free from their wrath. But disrespecting such places or offerings, even if accidentally or by chance, the nymphs could become deedly, cursing the offender, be they willful or ignorant, with illness, insanity or even death. The El Nadaha is a local Egyptian variant of the popular concept of destructive, yet alluring, beautiful but dangerous, water spirit capable of both great good and great harm. This Naiad-like spirit is strongly tied to the river Nile and is said to call out to the men, addressing them by their real first name, giving a sensation like she knows them well, beckoning them to join her in the waters. On top of it all, El Nadaha's voice possesses hypnotic, alluring, magnetizing properties. Once a man hears his name being called by the entity, he wouldn't be able to let go of the insatiable need to get close to her, to fulfill each and every command of hers and finally, to give in his life for her. Even if the man is in the company of either his family, or other men that could theoretically overpower her and defeat her, her voice still affects the one person, leaving others shocked and scared, sometimes outright forcing them to run away. The tall, slender, immensely beautiful, dark-haired nymph calls with soft, yet loud voice that her victim cannot resist. She can use this trick to call out men from their homes too, even if they are far away from the waters, as she's capable of walking on dry land. In both instances, the victim ends up dragged into the water and devoured alive by the beautiful man-eateress. Some legends say that if someone was strong-willed enough to prevent another from being captured by the creature, will be the next one to fall her victim. And then, even his willpower won't be enough to save him.
Not much info could be found about the Imwi, also known by the local people as the Drowner, by the creature's name, though, I assume they are one of those malevolent water spirits that drown people from one reason or another, depicted as looking human-like, but either transparent, or made entirely of water itself, or water-like substance. The being is said to be the force behind many of the cases of drownings. Pretty much most of old cases of people drowning were attributed to the Imwi. Whether the creature is just evil, naturally malevolent, or kidnaps humans for their own reasons, is unknown, and most sources speak just about what they do and not why and how they do it.
Iranian peri were pretty much what Velas were to the Slavs. Ethereal creatures of immense beauty, very often portrayed with wings, representing both beauty and danger of the natural world. Peridarii in particular were associated with these aspects of the seas and waters. They differ from the jinn, in that the stories featuring them usually abound in supernatural elements, like other worlds and parallel planes. Persian sources who were the first to describe the peri give them more of an evil or dangerous nature that got more positive reputation with the arrival of Islam. Either way, they were said to live in societies with their own culture, behavior rules, and such, and much like humans, could be very emotionally and morally complex. Despite their otherworldly, above-human beauty, these entities could be dangerous. It was said that they would kidnap and enslave humans who committed sins or transgressions, thus serving as a way to keep moral code in check. Their name is thought to mean the winged ones, and just like Slavic Velas, they were often depicted with wings, as they flew through the air. They were also skilled shapeshifters and could assume human form as well as disguise themselves as innocent doves, and investigate humans in such way. They could also turn invisible. They were said to serve the fairy king, who might or might not be an abducted human from the past, and are said to vary in their faith and worship. They could be both Muslims as well as pagans or any other faith. The Turkish sources mostly speak of them as benevolent spirits. The Paris were said to be the masters of all fairies and were considered powerful magicians, able to cast potent love spells on behalf of certain individuals. At times, they appear to choose particular individual humans to invite them to a wedding party of another peri. It is said such individual would be blessed with otherworldly experiences, unlike any party seen on Earth. Kind of like the realm of Queen of Elfame from Ireland. The Anzu was a gigantic bird-like spirit depicted with lion's head and beak like a saw, who could control weather and create destructive tornadoes and sandstorms with a flap of its wings. In one of the Mesopotamian legends, he steals the tablet of fate from Enki and gets pursued, punished, and killed by Ninurta, the storm god, who collects the tablet and gives it back to the chieftain god. Another tale speaks of a Anzu chick in the nest found by a hero, Luganbanda, in Zagros Mountains in one of the titulary legends about the land's ancestry and first kings, suggesting that there is not one Anzu, but many of them and they are a species, rather than an individual. These mighty birds could summon storms, much like the Native American thunderbirds, and were said to be chaotic in nature, much like most Mesopotamian water spirits. These spirits of chaos in birdie forms were said to be born, originate or otherwise appear from the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates River near the Egypt, making them sort of aquatic weather spirits.
Apsu was a semi-divine primordial being of the freshwaters and first lover and husband of dragon goddess Tiamat, who personified salty sea waters. Together with her, he had countless divine and non-divine children. However, soon enough their children had their own children, and all of these beings started behaving in destructive, disobedient way. Apsu decided he had enough and decided it's time he gets rid of his own offspring. The children found out though and teamed up with Enki, convincing him to kill their father, which the deity does, much to Tiamat's horror. It's Apsu's death that causes Tiamat to spawn innumerable monsters and go on to war with the gods.
Lamu are a class of supernatural spirits from Mesopotamian folklore that look like old men dressed in red. They had long beards and carried a spade wherever they go. Associated with water, they guarded the gates of Enki's palace abode, that was most likely placed under water itself. This led them to being called guardians of the sea despite being associated with a single temple of Enki in Eridu. It's possible that before they acquired the roles of divine gatekeepers, they were known as local river spirits, and their main task was to watch over the cattle, the animals and the household in general, mixing the role of water spirit and local house spirit. Contrary to what the scholars might think later on, these entities were never malevolent and were never demonic in nature, though many seem to believe they were demons. In fact, it was the opposite, and the mighty, red-dressed, bearded sages protected the household from demons, warding off evil influences instead. In texts related to describing the divine, a singular Lamu sometimes appears among the ancestors of Anu alongside a feminine counterpart, Lahamu, following the primordial pair Duri and Dari, who symbolize the eternity. It's unclear why this is, as the Lamu are not divine and were never considered to be gods. It's widely believed that the first Lamu ever created was one of the sons of Tiamat and Apsu, who later rebelled against their father, when they realized he wants to destroy all of them. It's possible that the Lamas that came after him are that son's children or initiated followers.
Bones was one of the 7 supernatural beings called Apkallu, and like his 6 brothers, he was created by Asu in order to serve as 7 divine messengers. He was the most aquatic adapted of all 7 brothers, and had fish tail and scales running all along his humanoid body, head, legs and hands. He emerged from the waters to tech humans' arts like writing, creativity and sciences. He and other Apkallu were tasked with giving the humanity the knowledge of order, law, agriculture, maths and divine wisdom that eventually preserved their teaching, after they themselves succumbed to the flood cast by the god Enlil, angered by the humanity's destruction. It is believed that he in particular rose up from the former Persian Gulf, nowadays known as the Erythraean Sea, marking this place as symbolic place of his birth.
Tiamat is the most famed dragon in the history of dragons as a whole, and Babylonian mythology additionally depicts her as a being of primordial sea waters, by some seen as a goddess. She was a lover and a mate of a god Apsi who was the embodiment of fresh waters, and their union produced many offsprings. However, when the children become too bothersome, enraged Apsu attempts to rid of his own children and ends up killed by them. Apsu's death hurts and enrages Tiamat, and she creates tons of malevolent monsters, and with such army, she goes on to war with her own children. She assumes mighty sea dragon form and together with Chingu, who becomes her new lover, lunges into the battle to avenge the death of her husband. She almost wins, but then Marduk, a storm god, joins the battle. He soon gains upper hand and manages to kill Tiamat in her dragon form. And afterwards, he cuts her body into fragments, from which he creates the world as we know it, mountains from her breasts, meadows from her tail, ground from her body and oceans from her spilled blood. Although she and her spawn seemingly failed and lost, she never truly died, as parts of her exist in every part of the earth we walk upon, as it was literally created from her body, as legend says. So, technically speaking, the dragon shapeshifting demigoddess had her last laugh, even though post-mortem.
The Leviathan became so iconic, people named whales and dinosaurs after the mythical beast. Not only that, the fantasy genre abound with demons called Leviathan in movies and series. What's the true Leviathan like, then? Contrary to what modern evangelical circles would like you to believe, the biblical Leviathan was not a demon, nor any evil or demonic monster. Originally a god's creation, although so huge and destructive that God was said to only leave one female alive, killing the other two, so she cannot procreate, as it would tore the earth apart. Leviathans were believed to be a kind of serpent, described as wreathed coiling serpent of immense size and scales so tough, nothing under heaven or earth could penetrate, nor pierce them. The Leviathans could also breathe fire, like modern-day depictions of dragons, despite their aquatic nature. It is said that the only remaining Leviathan will be killed at the end of times, and her meat is said to be then served to the ones who entered heaven. In modern times, mostly associated with primal chaos, evil and the sin of envy, and seen as an adversarial figure, rather than a dangerous force of nature. The influence of Egyptian mythology and the theme of the sun god fighting the serpent of destruction have been immersed into eerily Judaic and Christian tales, as depiction of God fighting the Leviathan, thus making the creature a sort of enemy to God, contrary to its origin being his own creation. Leviathan was not one of a kind though. She was often paired with two other beasts, as she herself was a beast of the sea. There was Behemoth, who was the beast of the land, and Ziz, the beast of air, who created a kind of triad of malevolent or monstrous forces inhabiting the earth. Her scales were not only impenetrable, they were shining like diamonds. Judaic texts like Talmud claim that when the new world in heaven arises and the new Jerusalem comes, its walls would be covered with Leviathan's giant skin, illuminating the entire palace.
The Rahab is both a name for a creepy sea spirit monster, as well as a righteous Jerichoan prostitute who saved Moses' people on their way to Jericho. Obviously this listing describes the former. Later the name became associated with the Egypt as a whole, as the land on which the Israelites suffered the most, linking the sea monster and the nation of slavers via a common name. The name could also fall for poetic use, standing for both arrogance, the sea and the abyss alike, the two of the latter being obviously intertwined like in other cultures at the time. In the Psalms of David, the Rahab is described like a kind of sea dragon, being distinct from the Leviathan by having multiple heads, much like the Greek Hydra. Further biblical texts compare slaying the Rahab to the victory of good over evil and God over sin. The entity is at times compared to the Mesopotamian dragon goddess Tiamat and the neighboring folklore of Acadia, where similar, destructive and malevolent sea dragon existed, by the name of Labu. Some scholars seem to link the Rahab, both as a creature and as a word itself describing something different than a creature, with a quasi-personified concept of the dangers of the Red Sea, mentioned many times by the Hebrew Bible. Strictly malevolent, the Shavuot are said to inhabit any kind of open water spaces and are nocturnal in nature and working. They are said to execute their actions the most frequently during Tuesday nights and Shabbat nights of Fridays. They inhabit the waters people find good to drink like fresh water, but when someone attempts to drink that water such being resides in during their active phase, the entity may curse the one drinking with illness, or even blindness. They could mess with the optic nerve of anyone who drinks the water from the sources they are active in, causing all types of issues, from vision deterioration, to glaucoma, to total blindness. Let's say as a person after a double premature's retinopathy. This concept freaks me out. For this reason, the superstitious and cautious people avoided drinking water at any nighttime from any uncovered water source, and if by chance, thirst forced them to do so, they spoke a special incantation to ward off or banish the influence. This incantation could also be said over someone who fell the being's victim.
The alluring, mysterious Aisha Kandasha reminds me a bit of Native American First Nations folklore about the deer woman. Just like her, she is said to be otherworldly beautiful, her charm enchanting you the moment you lay eyes on her. This charming beauty, all she needs to do, is make you look in her eyes, and then and there, you are all hers, whether you like it or not. You can't stop thinking about her, you can't stop following her, even when she leads you straight into the bank of the beach, and then into the water. She doesn't need to speak, she doesn't need to sing, she doesn't need to cast curses or spells, because her gaze is a curse and a spell. You won't notice when you walk into the raging waters after her, you won't notice the water filling your lungs as you drown, you won't notice your own death in the water's embrace. All you will think about is her. Even when she transforms right in front of your eyes. Her human until this moment skin, crackling and falling off, scales emerging from beneath the crafty disguise, sharp teeth filling her mouth and eyes dead and deep like the depths of the ocean, but it is already too late. Her delicate nails turn into sharp eagle-like talons and quicker than you can react, quicker than you can scream, she snatches you, drags you underwater and drowns you before you have a chance to save yourself. What she does with her victims after she drowns them is unknown. She may eat them, she may imprison their souls as her eternal slaves or lovers, or she may simply drown the human beings because it's her nature. We don't know. What we know is that there's one more similarity to the aforementioned deer woman. There's a reason why in her human form she always wears long, floor-dragging skirts and dresses. Because her legs are the only part of her body that she cannot disguise, and even in human form, when someone manages to peek at them, they would know they are cooked, 'cause their women's legs should be, the entity has hairy, camel-like hooves. You can either recognize the Aisha Kandasha by her hoofed feet, or by the way she wants you to go into water with her for apparently no reason. But yeah, when she already casted her spell on you, breaking free from her mind control before it's too late would require very strong will.
Not much info exists about the mysterious Bhudarya, and he seems to be more of a folkloric character, rather than mythological being. This half-man, half-amphibian creature calls to the sailors from the middle of the seas with a painful, wailing call. Of course, approaching this mysterious voice didn't end up well for the one who attempted to get close. Locally known as the Lord of the Sea, this pre-Islamic spiritual figure could be revered in ancient times, but nowadays, he is only seen as the bringer of doom and death to anyone who answers its call.
कहने को जश्न बहारा है इश्क